to make this video. I've been meaning to make it for a while, but current circumstances have pretty much taken full focus with what's going on in the world right now. But I figured that now's as good a time as any to try to go over just some thoughts and feelings on, now that every trilogy is completed, now that I've seen Rise of Skywalker now 1, 2, 3 times, I wanted to finally give my thoughts on the similarities, differences, how I agree with some of the things that was done between Kylo and in relation to Vader, how I think it was a slightly different. So full disclaimer up front, these are just my thoughts and feelings. Anybody else's thoughts and feelings that are different are 100% completely cool, and I don't. That's the thing with me, especially in the Star Wars fandom. I don't disagree with anybody. I don't try to change anybody's minds. I don't try to do any of that. I talk about the positives that I see, and if people agree with it, fantastic. If they don't, fantastic. These are just my kind of thoughts and ideas on it. After seeing, I've seen the original trilogy. I would actually be incorrect if I tried to guess a number. It's numerous. I'll just put it like that. I've watched the prequels now, cumulative, probably about 4 times through. As a trilogy. Individually, I've watched probably Revenge of the Sith more times than the other episodes in the prequel trilogy, just because, as for my money, Revenge of the Sith is as close to the original trilogy as it can possibly get. It just still had a long way to go to try to get to OG trilogy level, but it got as close as any one of the 3 in the prequels. So I'll just put it like that. So to try to soak up the story of Anakin, because full disclaimer, as you've known from my past videos, Anakin is my favorite character in the Star Wars universe, as far as his whole story, meaning deemed the chosen one, becoming a Jedi Knight, becoming a general of the Grand Republic, becoming the hero of the galaxy, then having his equally horrific fall to the dark side, all of the horrible things he did as the Dark Lord of the Sith, then full redemption, wash, rinse, repeat. I know in this trilogy, in the sequel trilogy, they were trying to do the same for Kylo. They had to have a big bad to try to be on par with Vader. I sometimes wish they didn't try that, because Vader, in my estimation, can't be duplicated, and that's just not a fanboy opinion. If you go back on it, look at it, the greatest villains of all time, not even in Star Wars, but across movie history, have been very unique, have never quite been seen before when they showed up, and very rarely seen to that level after. Those make the best bad guys, in my opinion. And to try to emulate, duplicate, carbon copy, I always think that's a little, you're setting yourself up for more failure than success in my eyes, because you are already behind the 8 ball. If you start with somebody fresh, there's no 8 ball. But if you're trying to emulate somebody who is as universally known as Vader, you either have to be, even perfection still isn't going to be enough, because even perfection means you're still behind an 8 ball with your perfection. Again, just my view. So I wish they had maybe gone a completely different route as like a bad guy, not with the Vader relation, but they did. So I tried to give it as much leadway, as much grace as possible. So all the positives that they did with Kylo, I think, were were impactful. I mean, he came from automatically, once you find out who he is, you know that his lineage is second to none. He's the son of Han Solo, the son of Leia, the nephew of Luke, the grandson of Vader. I mean, dude, come on. So all of that combined makes it, and this just hit my head, to make him from that lineage makes it even harder sometimes to try to do all that you need to, because it's like no matter what you do, there's going to be people in the fandom that go, well, it wasn't good enough. So, but I admire the fact the writer's tenacity to take that, because that's a pretty big shoe to fill, to try to cover all that lineage and do it justice. So when you're looking at it, they did the best they could. Kylo was conflicted, just like Anakin. He was quick to emotional reactions and outbursts, just like Anakin. He was almost too insanely powerful to kind of say, okay, this is legit, just like Anakin. Because back then Yoda, we all understand that Yoda is the most powerful, but no matter what, Anakin never went toe-to-toe with Yoda. And Yoda also, to be fair, didn't go toe-to-toe with Anakin to try to find out who truly was, the greatest. I don't have to have a head-on battle to go like, okay, which, one is greater than the other. I've always believed that no matter how much love I have for the character of Anakin, that Yoda would have just, there is no comparison to Yoda. He's the only one that went toe to toe and held his own and walked out alive facing the Emperor full on. I mean, Luke at the end of Return of the Jedi, he got attacked by lightning, but that was it. Yoda went full on, completely head to head with Sidious at his most powerful, when he first exposed himself and turned, and basically you felt the entire push of the dark side is equal to Yoda was to the light, Sidious is to the dark, and Yoda survived it. Granted, he did not win, but he made it out with his life. So I've got to say that Yoda is the more powerful, because I don't think Anakin, if had gone head to head with Sidious or anybody else, would have that made it. Mace maybe could have, had Anakin not chumped his ass and cut his arm off. But all right, I'm getting sidetracked. But so Kylo and Anakin, for the most part, are mirror images. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, because you don't want to just copy Anakin for the sake of copying him. And I kind of, in The Force Awakens, when Han says he's got too much Vader in him, I thought that was it was a misrepresentation. They were just trying to, I guess, what I felt by that, they were trying too hard to make the comparison between Kylo and Vader. I think Kylo had a lot of Han in him, and how I'll say that is, everybody was cracking on Kylo for having emo outbursts and stuff like that. That didn't come. That was a combination of Anakin and Han. How many times did Han lose it in A New Hope, Empire, Return of the Jedi? The dude would snap. He'd start yelling. He'd start hitting things. I mean, that was Han. That wasn't so much Anakin. Anakin could get triggered, but he had been trained enough by the Jedi to kind of quell it up until the very end when he was making his turn. But Han was just, he would go from happy to triggered in a second. So I always thought that when that was a kind of like a line that they were trying, at that point I was on board, but that when they had Han say he's got too much Vader in him, I'm like, okay, you're trying too hard to sell the point of Kylo and Vader. I would actually like to think that there was more Han in Kylo than Anakin. And kind of my backup on that is when Snoke was talking to Kylo in the beginning of The Last Jedi. He said, "You have your father's heart, and that's what's making him struggle so much with the events of Kylo killing Han at the end of Force Awakens." So that's why I've got sympathy for Kylo, and I would say makes him different than Anakin, because Anakin just had Anakin. And what I mean by that is he didn't have a father. Obi-Wan was kind of like his foster father. He had father-esque figures in his life between Qui-Gon for a second, Yoda, Mace, Obi-Wan, things like that. But he didn't biologically come from somebody. He was like the Jesus Christ of Star Wars. Like he just was created. The reason why I have, and that created sympathy for me for Anakin, because Anakin didn't have a kind of like a potential North Star to try to follow. Kylo, on the other hand, how I see that they're different, Kylo had almost too many North Stars in his life, meaning, just imagine. So I didn't think that when he had emotional outbursts that he was like too emo. Just imagine trying to cope with this. Again, your mom is the general of the New Republic, hero of the previous war to save the galaxy, and daughter of Darth Vader. Your uncle is the Grand Master of the New Jedi Order, the most powerful Jedi ever, the one who was at the only one left standing at the confrontation between Luke, Darth, and the Emperor at the end of Return of the Jedi. Your father is a general of the rebellion who helped save the rebellion on multiple occasions, helped blow up 2 Death Stars, destroyed Jabba the Hutt. I mean, countless things. So that's your dad. Then again, like I said earlier, your grandfather is fucking Darth Vader, aka Anakin Skywalker, the greatest and also the most brutal and ruthless figure to ever exist in the galaxy. Equally so. He was equally as much as a hero as he was an absolute villain. So imagine all that is in you. How do you think you would act, react, handle things? What most people don't know, because if you only watch the movies, you don't know the true backstory. What actually started the turn for Kylo is in the book, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, so I apologize, but in the book, Aftermath Bloodlines, it tells how Leia became a general of the Resistance. She was actually going to be basically the Palpatine-esque figure of the New Republic. She was going to be the Grand Chancellor. She was within a single, a single breath of being the leader of, because she was it. After everything was over, Mon Mothma had gotten too old. She didn't want the job. Bail wasn't around. Nothing. She was basically it. She was the Princess of Alderaan who just helped in destroying the Empire. She's the natural selection as the leader of the New Republic. What happened was a political rival paid somebody to get information on Leia, and that person apparently had information that we only understood, that only a few people knew, but somehow it leaked out. So right before she was going to be crowned the brand new Chancellor of the New Republic, it was leaked out to the galaxy that she was the daughter of Darth Vader. Because up until that point, prior to from Return of the Jedi, the only people that knew, and they swore to secrecy of who Vader really was Luke, Han, and Leia. And that's in the book. So somebody, somehow, maybe somebody in the Empire, one of the remnants of the Empire, they allude to it, but they don't hammer it down. They say that somebody gained valuable information, because a lot of the Empire remnants did escape from Endor, and they went out into the unknown region to regroup as the First Order. So some of them knew who Vader was, his true identity. So they kind of, they could have leaked it. Well, all that being said, or now that I know that the Emperor survived Endor, he could have leaked it because he of course knew. So, but that destroyed the trust factor with Ben, with his parents and his uncle, because he thought, like, how could you lie to me and not tell me who my grandfather was? And also, you didn't tell me who my grandfather was, and it turns out my grandfather is the most powerful Force practitioner probably of all time, aside from Grandmaster Yoda. So that started his turn to the dark side, when he found out that his parents and his uncle had basically lied because they never gave him information on his grandfather. He always wanted to know who his grandparents were. So all that being said, the book is a real good read, and it gives a lot of depth to the Kylo character more than the movie does. So if you read the books, I'm always a big fan of reading the books and the comics as much as you can, because it adds context and layers to the movies that you would not have otherwise. If you just straight up watch the movies, Anakin didn't become my favorite character by the movies. He ended up becoming my favorite character through the books and through watching the Clone Wars animated series, which is still going on. That's what solidified, because it gave me all the internal backstory that we did not have, which then explained in full graphic detail why his turn happened. Because if you just take it by the movies, it's too sudden, it's too rushed, it makes no sense, and then you're like, this makes no sense. Read all the books, read the comics, watch the show, then you go, okay, you could have seen that coming a mile away, and it makes total sense. So the same thing with Kylo. Lack of trust. This also just hit me. Lack of trust with Kylo and his parents and his uncle is what led to his fall. The same thing with Anakin. Lack of trust with the Jedi, because he didn't believe it was right to spy on the Chancellor. Throw out the window that, yes, if they were right to spy on him because he was fucking Palpatine, but I'm just saying, at the core, he believed it went against the Jedi way. Anakin did believe into the Jedi way, and he believed it was wrong to lie and spy on the Chancellor. So therefore, the distrust came in. Then he was much more easy to turn. So there's the parallels with Kylo and Anakin that make it a lot more believable, and it makes more understanding added to why his emotional outbursts were so violent, why he was so conflicted when he killed Han, and how he was able to turn back to the good side. Leia sacrificed her life to turn Kylo back into Ben. Han came back in a flashback, solidified. The only thing that I wish they had done differently, and this is not a criticism, this is just a thought that I wish they'd done differently. I wish they had not followed the same beat and turned Kylo good and then let him die, kind of like Vader. What I mean by that, imagine how much more interesting a character arc could have been for Kylo, and also kind of pre-built more episodes, say episodes 10, 11, and 12, had it been like Kylo turns back to Ben lives, and Rey brings him back, and he has to struggle through the steps of redeeming himself. He redeemed himself to Rey, but redeeming himself to the galaxy and proving that he is a good person to make up for all the destruction that he caused. Make up for the fact that he did kill Han. His mom did have to die for him to turn back to the good side. She technically maybe wouldn't have had to have done that had he already been either turned back or had never turned to the dark side in the first place. So imagine how much more interesting a character arc that would have been, to grapple with what you did as a bad guy. Vader I love Anakin, but Vader kind of got out easy. He turned and then he croaked. He was like deuces, kick rocks, I'm good now, I killed the Emperor, I'm gonna take my vacation now. And then he ends up turns into a barbecue charcoal briquette on Endor. but Kylo was very young. He wasn't damaged by time and battles and living in a suit. He had a long life potentially ahead of him. He could have spent that life building a new Jedi Order with Rey. So imagine, I mean, that's the only, again, not a criticism. It's just you could have done so much, and it was there. It wasn't like he had to create it. It was there for the taking. Let Ben live. You know, he might have been near death, but somehow he survived. You know, bringing Rey back, and they were able to rescue him, and then Rey and Ben fulfill the Jedi prophecy, keep the true Skywalker bloodline alive, not just Rey taking the name of Skywalker, which I thought was a real nice nod to keep it going. But imagine had the name and the bloodline still continued. Anyway, I mean, because if Ben and Rey had finally gotten together, the children they would have had, good Lord, they would have been so powerful. Or they could have just given birth to kids that could have fallen anyway and started all over again. Who knows? I'm just saying, like, the what ifs of that have always struck me, and they really struck me at the end of Rise of Skywalker after watching it a few times. I'm like, damn, that could have been a whole other trilogy right off the bat. Wouldn't even had to have really worried about writing a story. The story wrote itself. So, but anyway, those are my, thoughts and feelings. Some similarities to what I've heard people's opinions are. Maybe you can take a piece or two out of it to look at things differently. But I think Kylo is an excellent villain. I did enjoy Ben's turn. I'm glad that he did learn at the very end the power that he had for good was equal to his power that was used for evil. Could have done without him killing Han still. I'm never going to get over that. But anyway, so there are a very, very stark similarities between him and his grandfather, but there are subtle differences that if you look at it in a different light and say he's an amalgamation of all these different things, not just him being a Vader fanboy, and that was it, because that's shortchanging Ben/Kylo. I think that he did have a fascination with his grandfather, because, I mean, who wouldn't? I mean, even though he was bad, he was also the greatest Jedi hero of his era. So there's equal amounts good to gain out of him being his grandfather as also the bad. And we also, these thoughts are just hitting my head. Also, he was swayed by his grandfather, quote unquote, Darth Vader. But now that we know that it was the Emperor speaking to him as Vader, because that never ever made sense. I'm like, Vader turned at the end of Return of the Jedi, and in Force Awakens, I'm like, he said, "Show me again, grandfather." I'm like, how did he show him in the first place? I'm like, he was not evil. He had turned back to the light. Now it made sense. That's why I'm a fan of doing reviews after the trilogy is complete, because you're missing a lot of things to make